Hello and welcome to a special edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. In November 2012, Chinese President Xi Jinping articulated a vision for the nation's future that he called the Chinese Dream. He presented the dream with specific goals like becoming a well-off society by 2021 and set out detailed action plans a year later. According to research done in 2014, around 90% of Chinese people are aware of the Chinese Dream, compared to nearly 80% of British people who have no idea that a British dream even exists. So what are the differences between the Chinese dream and so-called dreams of other countries? What power and potential lie behind this Chinese dream? To find out more, I'm joined in London by David Roth, CEO of the Store WPP, a communications services group. They carried out a research to discover the power of Chinese dream in comparison with American dream and British dream. Also joining us in Beijing is Zhang Hai, research fellow at the National Strategy Institute of Tsinghua University. Welcome to both of you. First of all, let's interpret the Chinese dream. And David, how come your institute decided to do a research about the Chinese dream? And tell us a bit about the circumstances behind your research and this report that you released.
Well, at WPP, China is a very important market for us. It's our fourth largest market. Understanding the Chinese consumers is very key to us being able to understand what changes are happening and the implications for brands and our clients. So the genesis of looking at the China Dream really was to get under the skin of something, as you said at the top of the program, that the Premier of China has talked about, and to understand what it actually means to the Chinese consumers and the implications that may well have both for China's development and the way in which brands will develop in China as well.
Yeah. So how many people did you talk to? How many people did you talk to, and how long did it take?
The study took us about 6 months to do, because not only did we look at Chinese consumers, we also wanted to compare Chinese consumers and the notion of what the Chinese dream was to the notion of what the American dream is and also what the British dream is. So not only did we talk to Chinese consumers and citizens, we also talked to British and American citizens as well, and we did about 1,000 interviews in both of those countries.
Yeah. What is the most interesting finding of your report?
I think the most important thing is how important dreams are still to citizens in countries. We live in a very technical age, a very connected age, a very digital age, where lots of things happen virtually. But actually, even now, having a dream is phenomenally important. People believe that having a dream helps them understand what life is about. It gives them hope, it gives them aspiration. So that's the most important thing. The second thing is how dreams, we looked at two aspects, I suppose, of dreams. The first dream was your own personal dream, and the second was your country's dream. And I think one of the things that surprised us a little bit about people's personal dreams in both China and in America and in the UK was how similar those dreams are. When you delve into it slightly deeper, I suppose it's not that surprising. But people's aspirations and their dreams are about to have a successful life, to have good health, to have a good job, to have enough income in order to support their families. So at that sort of level, people's personal dreams right across China, the UK and the US are pretty much the same.
Yeah. What are the differences? What are the biggest differences, however? And this is what we want to talk about.
Well, I think this is really the key, and the differences are not so much on the personal side, but your country's dream. So I'm sitting here in London, and actually very few people in the UK know of what a British dream is. and when you delve into it and you ask them deeply to think in the back of their minds what the British dream could be about, it's very much historic. It's not about today's Britain. In America, when you look about the country dream, again, it's very much about, I suppose, that great American dream of anybody could become President of the United States. Whereas in China, there is a great sort of similarity between what people say their personal dreams are and what they believe the dream of China as a nation should be. And that really is the biggest difference between the dreams of China, the US, and the UK.
Zhao Hai, now you have read through the report. What has caught your attention at first glance?
Well, first of all, thank you, David, for the report. And it's a timely report. It's very detailed and in comparative perspective. I think one of the things stands out first for us is that how similar the Chinese dream and American dream and British dream in terms of sharing personal dreams and the goal of personal pursuit of happiness, of health, safety, and good job for economic benefit is really similar across the board. And also, I think other than these three countries, these goals can be shared not only these three countries, but also other countries, perhaps India, Brazil, Russia, everywhere. China just concluded successfully the BRICS country meeting in China. And I think those developing countries specifically will share those goals in terms of pursuing a happy and better life in the future. But secondly, I think the scope of the study is still very limited because America and UK are both English-speaking countries. And also, the United States share a commonality with China that both societies are very diversified with very many ethnic, religious, and also different regions. So that's why these two countries are very diversified in terms of population and region. But the UK is more unified, smaller in terms of as a nation state. So I think comparing the three, it's a little bit problematic. If we add other countries, like I said, developing countries, big developing countries like India, Brazil, or South Africa, maybe the report will be more interesting and we'll have better points to point out the commonality.
Yeah, what do you think, Zhao Hai, is the biggest or are the biggest differences between the American dream and the Chinese dream? I mean, we've heard American dream being talked about a lot, freedom, opportunity. If you work hard, you can become anybody, you can achieve anything. A Chinese dream is a relatively new concept. What is the biggest difference between these two different dreams in the Chinese eyes?
One of the key things from the report is that the Chinese national dream and personal dream are interdependent. That point I agree with. The thing is...
what is the Chinese national dream? Would you spell out in simple terms here a little bit?
Well, in the near term, President Xi Jinping laid out two 100-year goals. The number one is by year 2021, the 100-year anniversary for the Communist Party, that China will be a well-off society. And number two, by 2049, China will develop into a socialist modern state. So I think these two are the two pillars for the Chinese dream for now. But Chinese dream is a dynamic and developing concept, and in the future we'll add more goals and more content into the Chinese dream.
David, did you want to add something? Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, I think that is very instructive in a sense that the Premier of China has
the President of China,
out,
by the way, David. It's the President of China. Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I think it's very instructive that the President of China has talked about 200-year dreams. I'm not certain that any president of any other country across the world is taking such a long-term view of the way in which their individual country is going to change and develop. So I think that in its own is phenomenally instructive about how important creating a vision and a long-term vision is for one of the clearly the most developing and changing and fast-growing countries in the entire world. And then I think what's really interesting is the extent to which the development of Chinese legal system, the development of Chinese companies as they look not only inside of China but also outside of China, and how that development in itself is going to help the creation and the enablement of that dream and that vision. I think one of the things that we found very interesting was looking back at the American dream in the 1960s and the extent to which big American corporations and American brands used the American dream as a way of positioning their products and their brands for what was very much the very first sort of global brand expansion. If you think about the likes of Coca-Cola and IBM, and latterly, I suppose, even McDonald's and certainly Marlboro, using the great iconography of America, and that very much defined what Americana was and what American dream was to the rest of the world. And I'm very interested to see whether Chinese companies and Chinese brands will use such iconography that will help them, Chinese iconography that will help them develop their brands and their companies outside of China, and that in itself, I believe, will help the development of the China dream, not just inside of China but across the world.
Interesting, yes, when you talk about the commercial, the branding part of it, or how Chinese enterprises can better ride on this Chinese dream to achieve a commercial success and in return propel to success this the Chinese goals. But Zhao Hai, when the Chinese leadership designed these two goals, for instance, or raised the concept of Chinese dream, what did they have in mind? Why was it necessary for them to raise this idea? I mean, they could have just said, we have the next development goal, you know, like the next 5-year plan. Why did they have to mention this dream? Was it the first time that the Chinese people have a dream to collectively try to realize?
First of all, I think the dream is inspirational, and it's a call upon people to strive to realize their dreams, both personally and also nationally. I want to go back to David just a little bit. Just now, David mentioned about 100 years as a long-term and very specific goal setting for long-term development. I think looking back, in China there's another 100 years. That's 100-year accumulation. China suffered from colonialism, imperialism for over 100 years. And in China, this history is kind of burned into Chinese memory. And China has already, in its history, struggled to realize a dream that is independent, that is more advanced industrially, and also standing equal with other countries in the world. I think China Dream speak to that inspiration, and also speak to people's aspiration to more esteem, more respect in the world. Also, secondly, I think one thing that's important is that dream always related, not only in the United States and also in China, dream is also related to urbanization and industrialization. It's a process of modernization. So that's why in the 1960s, Americans talking about American dream, and now we're talking about Chinese dream, which both dreams related to a large scale of immigration from the rural areas, from abroad, and then to the cities, to the urban area. So I think in this sense, a lot of Chinese have their personal dreams of getting a car, getting a house, and Chinese government understand this and try to combine personal needs and personal demand with a national goal, with a political agenda.
Okay, we're going to take a very short break, and you have been watching The Point with me, Liu Xin. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to The Point with me, Liu Xin, and we have been talking about the Chinese dream in comparison with the American dream or the British dream. Now, David, joining us from London, according to your report, what aspects do you think the Chinese dream really refer to, and how can different companies, either in China or foreign companies trying to, do business successfully in China, ride the tide, ride the aspiration to realize the Chinese dream?
Well, we've talked quite a bit about, I suppose, this fusion between your personal dream and the nation's dream. I think that companies who are looking to do business in China, and indeed Chinese companies are looking to expand overseas, have the capacity now to be able to understand through this research and analysis exactly what the core aspects of both the personal and the Chinese dreams are about the change of society, about being able to realize your own ambitions, about becoming wealthier, about helping the development of both your family's development but also the nation's development. And I think that those companies that get and understand that and use that in their communication and also be able to use that in the way in which they go out outside of China, are those companies that are going to succeed at a faster rate. We looked at the research at a number of companies that have the closest attribution to some of the elements of the Chinese dreams, and we do see quite a close correlation between those companies that are beginning to talk about aspects of personal realization and society realization, not so much now in a very direct way, but a slightly indirect way, are companies that we think are poised for faster growth in the future.
Taking a look at some statistics, for instance, you said in your report, David, over 70% of Chinese young people have a strong desire to buy houses and cars, compared to fewer than 50% in both America and the UK. So can we say the Chinese people, especially the young, are living a harder life than their counterparts in the West in order to achieve their personal dreams?
Well, I think they're very much in catch-up mode. The equivalent consumers in both the UK and the US have had a long history of rapid consumption. Chinese consumers have a relatively short history, have gone from sort of little choice to abundant choice in a relatively short period of time. And we're also, of course, seeing very different economic cycles in the US and the UK versus China. So, yes, I think Chinese consumers are running very, very fast, are working phenomenally hard, have their eyes sort of fixed on both accumulating sufficient wealth in order to look after their family, their parents, their grandparents, and also be able to buy the consumer goods that English and UK and American consumers have taken for granted for many, many years. I think the key and really interesting thing that we need to look at in the context, I suppose, of this 100-year vision is what happens to Chinese consumption maybe 30, 40 years into the future, and whether that sort of thirst for having cars and buying homes is going to ease off a bit as it is across some of the more what we would now, I suppose, call slower growth markets around the world, such as the UK and also America.
Yeah, Zhao, why do you think the Chinese people place so much importance to these consumer items? And is the Chinese dream all about being materially more well off?
I think there are two specific points I want to make that plays into this urgency of getting more material, particularly big items. Number one is China's urbanization and industrialization happened in a relatively short period of time, basically 30 years and less. And compared to Western experience, China's time is probably 2 or 3 times shorter, which makes the real estate price pushed up by this accelerated process. And also, because of the family planning that happened since the late 1970s, the number of young people are shrinking in this country, and the problem of taking care of the old, taking care of the young, is getting more and more problematic and become a hard burden for the young generation. So I think these two factors started to urge the young people to start buying house early, to start buying cars and other big items early and take on debt. So I think in terms of China Dream, these burdens need to be taken care of by the government by establishing a wider welfare web, and also by establishing better healthcare system and education system, so that the desire can be taken off from the shoulders of the young generation, and the developmental benefit can be shared in a wider range of societies.
Mm-hmm. When we talk about the American dream, for instance... Yes, David, go ahead.
So I think that's a really critical point, which is, to further unlock the Chinese economy, the social net that I suppose I very much benefit from here in the UK, and to a slightly more limited extent consumers in the US benefit from as well. Clearly that is not there in China, and therefore we do see that China having one of the most highest savings ratios in the world, and one of the drivers of that is the uncertainty about what life is going to be like in the future, and ensuring that you have sufficient money in order to pay for medical and social care. And as we've just talked about, that's only going to get higher with the aging population, having to look after your parents and grandparents. So creating some sort of social net, I think, is going to be a key ingredient in reducing the savings ratio, and therefore unlocking what I would call, I suppose, the next wave of fast growth China, and also the next element of consumer growth, which I think will be different to the first wave of consumer growth. I think we find that in a lot of fast-growing countries, that the first wave of consumer growth is around sort of consumer goods, cars and houses.
David, let me ask you this question.
The second growth is slightly more considered.
Yeah, let me ask you this question. The majority of Chinese people don't follow any religion. Based on your report, do you think the Chinese dream serve as a strong belief, and that can raise the Chinese people's sense of happiness?
I think it can be a contributing factor to it. I'm not certain whether if there's a direct parallel between, in a sense, the Chinese dream, and whether that takes the place of sort of a religious view and a religious vision. But I'm absolutely convinced that because dreams are so powerful, dreams tap the emotional aspects within us as human beings. They have an amazingly powerful force, that if it's possible to sort of triangulate a personal dream with a nation's dream, that is an amazingly powerful force, I think, for good, for the development of both the individual and also development of the society as well.
Zhao Hai, what is your take on the same question?
Well, I think historically China is not a religious-dominated society. Traditional Chinese society was ruled by a Confucius government, and the Confucianism emphasized not religion, but family. And the state or the nation and the family are just two sides of one coin. Without a stable, harmonious society, there's no peaceful state, and without the strong, peaceful state, there won't be any good family relationship and harmonious society. So I think the two is interrelated, interdependent, closely related with each other historically. So that's why even today in Chinese political culture, religion does not play a very important or key role in terms of bringing people's happiness, sense of happiness.
Yeah, speaking about the alignment between the national dream and the personal dream, according to the report, about 53% of Chinese see a powerful country as part of the national dream, but only 19% see a powerful country as part of their personal dream. So, Zhao Hai, the personal and national dream seems to be less aligned in China than in the US and in the UK. Would that make the Chinese dream more difficult to be achieved?
No, I don't think so. I think this too actually makes a Chinese dream makes more sense in a developing country like China, particularly with a just like I said, a colonial and historical background, in which China suffered a lot by the invasion of Japanese and other imperial countries. So Chinese people understand without safety, without security, there won't be any happiness or material achievement personally. So I think in this sense, a lot of Chinese recognize and identify with the nation, with the national dream, which is very different from Western countries. It's making a lot of sense, and I think it's not contradictory to the realization of Chinese dream.
Mm-hmm. Now, David, this question.
I think
yes,
I think one of the things that's quite key now when you look at power, in a sense, is that I think there's the old style of power, which was sort of tanks and banks, sort of military power and financial power. I think now there's a new type of power, which is a softer power, which across the world, and I think also in China, is going to become significantly more important. Some of that softer power is economic power, some of that softer power is influential power, in terms of leadership, and the role that countries now play in the global community.
David, I want to ask you very quickly, I have 30 seconds left maybe. How did your Western interviewees react to the Chinese dream? Are they aware of it at all? And if so, what is their reaction in general?
No, they're not really aware of it as a concept. I think one of the things that I found most disturbing, I suppose, from my perspective as somebody who is a China observer and lived in China for a while, is the fact that looking forward, when you ask UK and American consumers in terms of powerful nations in the future, looking 15, 20 years ahead, they don't see that amazing growth that obviously we see within China. In terms of, they still think that the US and the UK is going to have the same amount of power and the same amount of influence.
Who do the Chinese
see?
Who do the Chinese see as an ideal country in 10 years, 15 years time?
Well, I think that's really interesting and worthy of just downloading the report and having looked at it yourself. The key thing is this: at the moment, the Chinese see America as being the ideal country. But when you say to them, in 20 years' time, 15 years' time, which country do you think will be the more ideal? Then they switch and believe that in that period of time, China will be the dream company.
That's
country,
very interesting.
And will be the ideal and the dream.
That's very interesting. That's actually about the time where the first 100-year goal is to be realized, according to the vision of Chinese President Xi Jinping. Anyway, we have to go. Many thanks to David Ross, CEO of the STORE WPP, a communications services group, and Zhao Hai, research fellow at the National Strategy Institute at Tsinghua University. And here is my last point. So according to the report, the great majority of Chinese people surveyed have a strong awareness of the Chinese dream. That is a good thing, I think, as that will give the nation a collective goal to strive for in the near future. Now, the Chinese dream is not just about the person, but also about the Chinese nation, and each individual will need to contribute to that bigger effort. On the other hand, if the national dream does not serve the individual members of society to achieve their personal dream, it will also lose its appeal in the long run and make the goal harder to reach. So indeed, it's a fine balance between the collective dream of a nation and the personal dream of each individual. There, I think, lies the big difference between the Chinese dream and the American dream. That's all for this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can follow us on Twitter or visit our Facebook page using the handle The Point with Alex. Download the application called CGTN Live or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.